To save myself from a lot of unnecessary drama, I always pretend I'm married. It started out as a simple shield. One afternoon while out shopping with my coworker Rachel, I spotted a coat that I absolutely fell in love with. It was gorgeous. The price tag was steep, nearly $4,000. The sales associate was laying on the charm, practically begging me to try it on. When I waved my hand and let the lie slip naturally. "Oh, thank you, but I'd better not. My husband would lose his mind if I bought this. Even if I took it home, I'd just end up having to return it." I didn't think twice about it, but the very next morning, a courier package arrived at the office. When I tore open the box, my heart stopped. It was the exact coat. Rachel's eyes went wide. She snatched the card tucked inside the tissue paper and read it aloud. "To my beautiful wife, if you love it, you should have it. You deserve every beautiful thing in this world. Your loving husband." I stood there completely frozen. My husband was a ghost, a phantom.
A convenient excusa.
I've never even been in a serious relationship, let alone walk down an aisle. Where on earth did this husband come from? For a second, I thought Rachel was playing a trick on me, making up the words on the fly. I snatched the card from her hand, but there they were, 2 lines of elegant, flowing handwriting, staring back at me. "Natalie, look at you. Playing the humble wife." She'll nudged me, grinning. "Here you are always complaining about how strict your husband is. And then he goes and drops $4,000 on a coat without blinking." A few other coworkers started drifting over to my desk.
Wow. Natalie.
"I had no idea your husband was this loaded. Seriously, talk about Loki." I forced a stiff smile, my mind racing so fast I couldn't find my voice. I had been at this marketing firm for 3 months, and my married persona was airtight. Whenever there was a happy hour I wanted to skip, or a tedious weekend project I wanted to dodge, I'd sigh and say, "I'd love to, but my husband has plans for us," was the perfect boundary. But the reality was that I was a textbook case of a late bloomer. I hadn't even held a man's hand, let alone built a life with one. I peeked into the box. Even the size was correct.
Who could have sent this?
A tiny narcissistic part of me wondered if I had a secret admirer. But the only person who had been there when I saw the coat was Rachel. I watched her closely as she gushed over the fabric. She seemed entirely genuine, completely devoid of any secret knowing looks. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of anxiety. As soon as I got home, I called the boutique's customer service line. An order of that size had to have a paper trail. But after a few moments of typing, the representative sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This purchase was made anonymously. The buyer requested full privacy protection, so we don't have any billing details on file." Anonymous. I stared at the coat hanging on my door for a long time, before finally shoving it into the darkest, deepest corner of my closet. The next morning, Rachel eyed my plain knit sweater. "Natalie, where's the coat? I was dying to see you style a $4,000 piece today." "Oh," I laughed nervously. "It's way too nice for a regular Tuesday at the office. I don't want to ruin it." I certainly wasn't going to wear something when I didn't know who bought it. I tried to lose myself in my spreadsheets, but an hour later, the receptionist buzzed my line. "Natalie, there's a package for you at the front desk." A cold trickle of dread washed over me. Sure enough, when I opened the small, heavy parcel, it was a limited edition designer vault, containing every single shade of a luxury lipstick line. The card inside bore the same message: "Your loving husband." Rachel gasped from the desk next to mine. "Oh my God. Isn't this the vault we were looking at online last week? The one you said you wanted so badly?" She was right, and I remembered exactly what I had said to her. I buy the whole set in a heartbeat. But my husband would roll his eyes. He constantly tells me my vanity is already overflowing. Rachel shook her head green with envy. "He tells you no, and then he buys the entire collection anyway." "Natalie, what kind of fairy tale marriage are you hiding?" Fairy tale. That was one word for it. Another word was terrifying. I didn't even know who this person was. My head throbbed as I shoved the lipsticks into my desk drawer. "Hey, are you okay?" Rachel asked, her tone shifting to concern. "You look pale. Do you and the mister have a fight?" I leaned into the excuse, offering a weak, miserable nod.
"Ah,
that explains it," Rachel said, satisfied with her own deduction. "He's trying to buy his way out of the doghouse. Honestly, with peace offerings like these, you should let him stay there a bit longer." I didn't answer. I quietly noted the tracking number on the shipping label, logged onto the courier's website, and initiated a live chat with customer support. 10 minutes later, the prompt popped up. "We apologize, but this shipment was dispatched under an anonymous corporate account. No sender information can be disclosed." Can you even do that with standard mail? I was still staring at the screen when the receptionist's voice echoed through the office. "Natalie, you've got flowers." Flowers. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like lead. A delivery guy was standing by the glass doors of our lobby. holding an enormous, breathtaking arrangement of white roses and delicate hydrangeas. "Are you Natalie?" the guy asked, checking his clipboard. "These are from your husband." I stood there like a statue. By the time I snapped out of it, the courier was already halfway down the corridor toward the elevators. Ran out after him. "Wait. Please wait." He stopped, turning around with a look of mild amusement. "Yes, ma'am. Who placed the order? Do you have a name?" "Your husband," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child.
No, I mean,
"Can I please see the account details on your tablet? Just the username or a phone number." The courier looked hesitant, but when he saw the sheer panic in my eyes, he relented and scrolled through his delivery app. The sender's profile was entirely blank. "Look, all I know is the order came through our premium dispatch. The arrangement was $500, and the guy left a $300 tip for a direct hand delivery. Your husband is incredibly generous, ma'am." I handed his tablet back, my hands trembling. I managed to murmur a thank you before retreating back to the office. Naturally, my coworkers swarmed. That bouquet must have cost a fortune. First the coat, then the vault. Now this. Your husband is setting the bar impossibly high. "Look, there's a card. What does it say?" I looked down at the small piece of cardstock nestled in the blooms. "Please don't be angry anymore, sweetheart." My fingers shook so hard, I nearly dropped the arrangement. "Natalie, you have to forgive him now," Rachel teased. "I don't care what he did. A man who loves you this much deserves a clean slate." I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. The coat, the makeup, the flowers. The only person who knew about those exact conversations was Rachel. And the moment I let her believe I was fighting with my husband, a bouquet arrived asking for forgiveness. Was she doing this? Was it some elaborate, incredibly expensive prank to expose my lie? But Rachel was a junior copywriter, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates. She didn't have thousands of dollars to throw away on a psychological game. None of it made sense. My mind was a chaotic mess, and by the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I felt a desperate need to ground myself. I decided to visit my grandfather. Grandpa's house was always my sanctuary. He cooked a massive dinner, and I sat beside him on the sofa, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. It was only then that I realized he wasn't wearing his hearing aid. "Grandpa," I said, raising my voice, "where is your hearing aid?" He turned his good ear toward me, blinking. "Oh, that old thing. I fell right into the lake yesterday while I was casting my line."
don't worry about it.
"I can get by just fine without it." "Of course you can't," I insisted, pulling out my phone to search for the best models on the market. "Don't go spending your hard-earned money on me, Natalie," he muttered, patting my hand. I ended up staying the night in my old bedroom. The next morning, a sharp knock at the front door woke me from a restless sleep. Rubbed my eyes and patted down the hallway. Grandpa was already opening the door to a delivery driver, holding a small cardboard box. "Sign here, please." Grandpa looked at the label confused. "Natalie, did you order something?" "It's already here." I froze, the last remnants of sleep instantly vanishing. I rushed forward. There, in the courier's hand, was a box from a high-end medical supply company. Inside was the exact top-of-the-line hearing aid. I had been researching the night before, but I hadn't placed the order. I had only added it to my cart. A cold sweat broke out across my back. "Ma'am, can you sign for this?" the driver prompted. Grandpa reached for the pen, but I grabbed his wrist. "Actually, I think there's been a mistake. We didn't order this." I need to refuse the delivery. This was for my grandfather. I couldn't risk him using something that came from an unknown, potentially dangerous source. As I pushed the box back toward the driver, my eyes caught the shipping label. Tucked under the plastic sleeve was a small familiar note. "Only the best for Grandpa, your grandson-in-law." The breath left my lungs in a sharp gasp. After sending the confused driver away, I took half the day off, drove my grandfather to a local clinic, and bought him a certified hearing aid in person using my own savings. On the drive back, I held his hand. "Grandpa, if you get any packages over the next few weeks, anything at all, promise me you won't open them. Call me immediately." He didn't quite understand the urgency, but he nodded, sensing the terror in my voice. "All right, sweetheart, I promise." When I finally went into the office that afternoon, I was running on pure adrenaline. How did this person know my grandfather's address? More importantly, how did they know about the hearing aid? I had only researched it on my phone the night before, while sitting in Grandpa's living room. Could my phone be tapped? It was the only logical explanation. Someone was monitoring my search history, my location, perhaps even my microphone. I left work early, went straight to an electronics store and bought a brand new phone. With cash, I did a factory reset on my old device and sold it to a refurbished tech kiosk. It was a massive hit to my bank account, but the peace of mind was worth every penny. For the next 4 days, the silence was deafening. No packages, no flowers, no notes. I finally began to breathe again. But on the fifth night, I fell into a deep, vivid dream. I was standing in a room filled with soft, golden light. A man was standing in front of me. He was tall with dark hair and eyes so expressive. They made my throat tight. He looked at me with an expression of profound, aching sorrow. "Wife," he murmured, his voice cracking. "You won't wear the coat. You won't touch the makeup. You even sent back the hearing aid for your grandpa. Do you hate my gifts? Do you just not want anything to do with me?" He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to brush my cheek, though I couldn't feel his touch. "It's your birthday today. If you don't like my choices, I'll just give you money, buy whatever makes you happy." I bolted upright in bed, gasping for air, my chest heaving. It was morning. The alarm on my phone was blaring. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of the dream. Today was indeed my birthday. I forced myself to get ready and head to work. I sat at my desk, chewing on a piece of toast while reviewing a marketing proposal. When my phone vibrated in my palm, I tapped the screen and my heart stopped.
It was an alert from my banking app.
Deposit received, $1 million. $1 million. I stared at the screen, convinced it was a glitch. A decimal point error. I logged out and logged back in. The balance was real. The available funds were there under the transaction details. There was a single memo. "Happy birthday, my love." Words from my dream echoed in my head. "I'll just give you money, buy whatever makes you happy." My hands began to shake violently. I sat there, paralyzed as my entire understanding of reality began to crumble. "Natalie, are you okay?" Rachel asked, waving a hand in front of my face. I slammed my phone face down on the desk. Yes, I'm fine. Just a headache." My God, what was happening to me? Where did $1 million come from? Was it possible to have a husband? I had somehow completely forgotten. The thought was so absurd, so deeply indicative of a fracturing mind, that a cold sweat broke out across my forehead.
No.
I knew my life. I remembered the quiet, lonely years of my 20s. I remembered the rent checks, the single-portion dinners, the weekends spent reading alone in my apartment. I had never walked down an aisle. I had never signed a marriage certificate. I was not losing my mind, but someone was trying very hard to make me feel like I was. "Natalie? Seriously, you're white as a sheet." Rachel's voice cut through the fog in my brain. She reached out, her hand hovering near my shoulder. "Are you sure you don't need to go home? If things are that bad with your husband?" "I'm fine," I croaked, my voice sounding like dry paper. I need to step out for a minute. Fresh air." I grabbed my purse, leaving my laptop open, and practically bolted from the department. I didn't stop until I was inside the safety of a locked stall in the ladies' room. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped my new phone as I pulled up my banking app again. The numbers hadn't changed. $1 million. It was sitting in my savings account, pending clearance, but fully documented. I tapped on the transaction details. The sender was listed as Alethea Group LLC, routed through a private wealth management firm in Zurich. I dialed my bank's customer service line. After navigating a maze of automated menus, I was connected to a Premier Accounts representative. "Hi, yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just received a large wire transfer, and I believe it was made in error. It's from Alethea Group." "Let me look into that for you, Ms. Vance," the representative said. I froze. "What did you call me?" "Oh, I apologize," the woman said, checking her screen. "I see your account is registered under Natalie Vance, but the routing node on the incoming wire had the recipient name listed as Natalie Vance. Is that not your married name?" "My name is Natalie Miller," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I am not married." "I have never heard of Alethea Group." "That's strange." The wire instructions were highly specific. They matched your routing number, your exact account number, and your social security index. The sender's bank verified the credentials on their end. "According to our protocols, since the funds have already been cleared from the originating bank, we cannot simply reverse it without a formal investigation, which could take up to 30 days. Would you like to file a dispute?"
Yes, please.
"Start an investigation," I whispered. "I don't want that money. Don't let anyone touch it." I hung up, leaning my head against the cold tile of the bathroom wall. Natalie Vance. Who was Vance? I racked my brain, trying to find any connection. I didn't know anyone named Vance. I had never dated anyone with that surname. Then, a sickening realization crept over me. The dream. "Wife, if you don't like my choices, I'll just give you money." How could a man in a dream predict a bank transfer that happened hours later? It was impossible. Unless the dream wasn't a dream at all. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to reconstruct the night before. I had slept at my grandfather's house in my old bedroom. It was a drafty, creaky old house in a quiet suburb. I remembered falling asleep to the sound of the wind rattling the window panes. But halfway through the night, I remembered a strange, rhythmic humming noise. I had assumed it was the old radiator. And then there was the voice. It had sounded so close, as if someone were whispering right into my ear. I had assumed it was my subconscious translating the stress of the past few days into a nightmare. What if someone was in the room with me? The sheer horror of the thought made me physically sick. I ran out of the bathroom, bypassed my desk entirely, grabbed my coat, the plain, cheap one I had worn to work, and left the building. I didn't care if I got fired. I didn't care about the marketing campaign due on Friday. I took an Uber straight back to my grandfather's house. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Grandpa was out at his weekly bridge game. I let myself in with my spare key, my heart in my throat. I marched straight to my old bedroom. It looked exactly as I had left it. The bed unmade, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. I began to search. I stripped the sheets off the bed, checked under the mattress, emptied the closet. Nothing. Then I knelt on the floor and looked under the bed. Dust bunnies, an old cardboard box of high school yearbooks, and, right near the headboard, a small, black plastic cylinder plugged into the wall outlet. It was plugged into the socket directly behind where my head would be when I slept. I pulled it out. It had no markings, no brand name. It looked like a high-end white noise machine, but when I turned it over, I saw a tiny microSD card slot and a small Bluetooth receiver light. I felt a cold sweat break out. I didn't have my laptop with me, but I knew what this was. It was a sleep whisper device, a directional speaker used in covert psychological harassment. It could project targeted audio at a specific frequency so that only the person lying directly in its path could hear it, making them believe they were dreaming or hearing voices. Someone had entered my grandfather's house while we were asleep. They had walked into my bedroom, plugged this in, and played a pre-recorded message to plant the dream in my head. And if they had access to my grandfather's house, they had access to mine. I drove back to my city apartment in a state of hypervigilant terror. I kept checking my rearview mirror, convinced every black sedan or delivery van was tailing me. My apartment was a modest one-bedroom on the third floor of a converted brownstone. When I opened the door, everything looked normal. My mail was on the counter. My coffee mug was in the sink. I went to my bedroom. I searched the outlets. Behind my nightstand, partially hidden by the headboard, was another identical black cylinder plugged into the wall. I pulled it out and threw it onto the bed as if it were a venomous snake.
My home was compromised.
My grandfather's home was compromised. My digital life was compromised. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching my head. How did they get in? There were no signs of forced entry. I had high-security deadbolts on my apartment door. I looked around the room, trying to think logically. I was a marketing associate. I didn't have state secrets. I didn't have wealthy enemies. The only thing I had done differently in the last 3 months was invent a fake husband to get out of happy hours and weekend overtime. The married persona. I had started the lie 3 months ago, shortly after taking the job at the firm.
Wait.
I took out my new phone. I had bought it with cash, and I hadn't linked it to my home Wi-Fi yet. I was using cellular data. I opened a browser and searched for Alethea Group LLC. The results were sparse. It was a shell company registered in Delaware, with subsidiaries in cybersecurity, private logistics, and high-end concierge services. There were no public names listed under the executive board, just a registered agent office in Wilmington. I searched for Alethea Group, alongside the name of my marketing firm, Apex Media. Nothing came up initially, but I didn't give up. I dug deeper, searching through public corporate filing databases, looking for any crossover in board members or investors. After an hour of frantic clicking, I found it. 2 months ago, Apex Media had been quietly acquired by a venture capital firm called Vanguard Holdings. And the principal investor of Vanguard Holdings? Julian Vance. My breath caught in my throat. Julian Vance was a reclusive tech billionaire. He had made his fortune in proprietary surveillance software, specifically data harvesting algorithms sold to government agencies and private security firms. He rarely made public appearances, and there were almost no photos of him online, save for a grainy, 10-year-old Forbes profile picture of a tall man with dark hair and striking, intense eyes. The man from my dream. He wasn't a phantom. He was real. And he owned the company I worked for. I sat in the dimming light of my apartment, the pieces of the puzzle violently snapping into place. 3 months ago, I started working at Apex Media. To protect my boundaries, I started lying about having a husband. But Julian Vance's software was integrated into the company's servers. Every email I sent, every Slack message, every casual search on my work computer, and likely every conversation captured by the microphone on my work laptop was being harvested by his proprietary algorithms. He had intercepted my lies. He had heard me telling Rachel that my husband wouldn't let me buy the $4,000 coat. He had heard me say my husband complained about my vanity overflowing with lipsticks. But instead of exposing me, instead of realizing it was a convenient lie to keep people at bay, this powerful, deeply disturbed man had decided to become the husband. He had used his wealth and his surveillance apparatus to play the role. He had tracked my location, tapped my personal phone, compromised my home Wi-Fi, and even sent physical intruders into my apartment and my grandfather's home to plant devices and deliver packages. It wasn't a game to expose me. It was a terrifying, real-world manifestation of an obsession. He was treating me like a doll in a custom-built dollhouse. And now, he had deposited $1 million into my account because I had rejected his physical gifts. A knock on my front door made me jump a foot in the air. I froze, staring at the entryway. My heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. The knock came again. Polite. Measured. 3 distinct raps. I crept toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the peephole. I pressed my eye to the glass. Standing in the hallway was a man. He was tall, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. He had dark, thick hair swept back, and his eyes, even through the distorted lens of the peephole, were incredibly expressive, filled with a quiet, intense focus. It was Julian Vance. Natalie, his voice came through the door. It was deep, calm, and entirely devoid of menace, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. Please open the door. We need to talk. My instinct was to run, to lock myself in the bathroom, to call the police. But who would the police believe? A junior marketing employee claiming a reclusive tech billionaire was pretending to be her fictional husband, or the man who had just legally wired $1 million into her account. He had a paper trail of gifts and messages of love sent to my office. To the outside world, I would look like a gold digger trying to extort a wealthy man, or a woman experiencing a severe psychiatric episode. He had built a perfect trap. I took a deep breath. I unlocked the deadbolt, pulled the door open, but kept the security chain on. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound strong. Julian Vance looked down at me. Up close, he was striking, but there was a strange, glassy stillness to his posture. He looked at me with an expression of profound, aching familiarity, the exact look from my dream. "You're angry," he said softly. "I understand. I went too far with the hearing aid. I shouldn't have involved your grandfather. It was intrusive. I apologize, Natalie." Intrusive. I laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "You tapped my phone. You broke into my apartment. You put speakers in my bedroom to whisper to me while I slept. Who the hell do you think you are?" "I am your husband," he said simply. "I don't have a husband," I yelled, slamming my hand against the doorframe. "I made him up. He's a lie. A ghost I invented so my coworkers would leave me alone." Julian's expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He just nodded slowly, as if explaining a simple mathematical equation to a child. "I know," he said. "I've known from the very beginning. I review the internal data audits for Apex. I saw the network logs. I saw your searches, your emails, your messages to your friends. I knew there was no husband. Then why?" I whispered, tears of frustration hot in my eyes. "Why do all of this?" "Because you wanted one," he said, his voice laced with a terrifyingly sincere warmth. "You created a space in your life for a partner. A partner who protects your boundaries, who spoils you, who takes care of your family, who gives you the freedom to say no to the world. You built the mold, Natalie. I merely stepped into it." "You're insane," I breathed, trying to shut the door. But he placed his palm flat against the wood. He didn't push, but the quiet strength in his hand made it clear the door wasn't closing unless he allowed it. "Is it insane to give you exactly what you asked for?" Julian asked. "You told Rachel you wanted that coat. I bought it. You wanted the makeup. I bought it. Your grandfather needed a hearing aid. I provided it. You wanted to be left alone, so I gave you $1 million so you never have to work a day in your life again. I am fulfilling your design." "I didn't design you," I spat. "I don't know you. You're a stalker with a bank account." Julian sighed, a look of genuine disappointment crossing his handsome features. "You're rejecting the reality because it frightens you. But look at the alternative, Natalie. If you expose this, what happens? You tell your friends the truth, that you lied to them for months, that you're a fraud. You lose your job. You lose your reputation. And the police? I have a team of lawyers who will ensure any investigation is buried before it begins. The money in your account is clean. The gifts were delivered to your office, accepted by you and your colleagues. To the world, we are a couple experiencing a private marital dispute." He leaned in closer to the crack in the door. "Accept the gift, Natalie. Let me be the shield you've been pretending to have. You don't ever have to see me if you don't want to. I will remain in the background, providing everything you need. All you have to do is wear the coat. Use the money. Let me take care of you." He slowly withdrew his hand from the door. "Think about it," he said. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide how you want to live your life. As a liar who lost everything, or as a woman who is everything she ever wanted." He turned and walked down the hallway, his footsteps silent on the carpet. I slammed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor, my chest heaving as I sobbed in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside made me jump. I sat in the middle of my living room floor, surrounded by the devices I had pulled from the walls. Julian Vance was right about one thing. He had built a perfect trap. If I went to the police, his lawyers would destroy me. If I confessed to my coworkers, my professional reputation would be ruined, and I would still be left vulnerable to a billionaire with infinite resources and an obsession.
He wanted me to submit.
He wanted me to accept his money, to wear his clothes, to become his passive, silent wife in a golden cage of his own making. But as the sun began to rise, casting long, pale shadows across my living room, the fear in my chest began to harden into something else. Anger. He thought he was the one pulling the strings because he had the technology and the money. He thought I was a weak, passive girl who had built a shield out of fear. But my lie wasn't born out of weakness. It was born out of a desire for control. I wanted to control my time, my boundaries, my life. And I wasn't about to hand that control over to him. If Julian Vance wanted to play the role of my husband, if he wanted to use his proprietary algorithms to monitor my every move, then I would use those exact same tools against him. I stood up, walked to my bathroom, and washed my face. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. "You want a wife, Julian?" I whispered to the empty room, knowing he was likely listening through some hidden microphone I hadn't found yet. "Let's see if you can handle one." I dressed in my finest clothes, not the cheap sweater, but a sharp, tailored blazer. I didn't wear the $4,000 coat, but I kept it in my closet. I went to work. When I walked into the office, Rachel was already at her desk. She looked up, her eyes wide. "Natalie, oh my God, are you okay? You vanished yesterday afternoon. We were all so worried." I forced a bright, radiant smile. I let out a soft, melodic laugh. "I am so sorry, Rachel," I said, leaning over her desk. "I had a bit of a panic attack. But my husband and I had a long talk last night. We resolved everything." Rachel's face lit up. "Really? Oh, thank goodness. I was so worried those gorgeous flowers were a trap." "No, not at all," I said, my voice carrying just enough so that the surrounding desks could hear. In fact, he realized he's been far too controlling. He wants to make it up to me. He's actually transferring a massive amount of his investment portfolio into my name. We're restructuring our entire marriage. Wow. Rachel breathed. Talk about a power move. "It is," I agreed. I sat down at my desk and opened my work laptop. I knew that Julian's tracking software was monitoring my keystrokes and search queries in real time. I opened the blank document. I began to type, knowing he was reading every letter as it appeared on his screen. "Julian," I typed. "You want to play this game?"
Fine.
"But a marriage is a partnership. If you want me to wear the coat, if you want me to keep the money, we do this on my terms." I paused, letting the words linger on the screen. "Here are my conditions. 1. You will immediately remove all surveillance devices from my apartment and my grandfather's home. I will know if you don't. I've hired a private TSCM firm to sweep both locations tomorrow morning. If they find a single bug, I will take the $1 million, hire the most aggressive public relations firm in New York, and release every single detail of your obsession to the press. I don't care if your lawyers sue me. The reputational damage to Vanguard Holdings and your government contracts will be catastrophic. Let's see how your investors feel about a CEO who uses state-level surveillance to stalk a junior employee. 2. You will transfer the remaining ownership of Apex Media to my name. If I am your wife, I deserve a seat at the table. I want full executive control of this branch. 3. We will meet. Tonight. At 8 p.m. The Penthouse restaurant at the Carlyle.
Public.
No wiretaps, no security detail at the table. Just us." I held my breath, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Suddenly, my work email chimed. It was an email from an external, encrypted address. The subject line was empty. Inside was a single PDF document. It was a scanned copy of a legal transfer of shares, ready for my signature. It would grant me 51% executive ownership of Apex Media, effective immediately upon signing. Below the attachment was a short message. "The sweeps will find nothing. The bugs have been deactivated and will be removed by noon. I will see you at 8 p.m., my love. Bring your appetite." A chill ran down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I signed the document digitally and sent it back. I had just become the majority shareholder of the company I had been working at as a junior associate only 3 months ago. At 7:45 p.m., I arrived at the Carlyle. I was wearing a simple black dress. I had left the $4,000 coat at home. I wanted him to know that his money couldn't buy my submission, only my negotiation. The hostess led me through the dimly lit, luxurious dining room to a secluded booth in the corner. Julian Vance was already sitting there. He looked incredibly handsome in a dark suit, sipping a glass of scotch. When he saw me, he stood up, his eyes locked on mine. He reached out to pull my chair, his movements fluid and polite. "You look beautiful, Natalie," he said, his voice low. "Save it, Julian," I said, sitting down and folding my hands on the table. "We are here to establish the rules of this arrangement." Julian smiled, a genuine, amused tilt of his lips. He sat down opposite me. "You're much sharper than I anticipated." I must admit, the corporate takeover of Apex was a brilliant touch. I like a woman with ambition. "I'm not playing a game," I said coldly. "You have crossed every line of human decency. You have terrorized me. You have violated my privacy, and you have threatened my family's peace." "I gave your grandfather his hearing," Julian countered softly. "I gave you financial security." "You did those things to control me," I retorted. "But you made a critical error, Julian. You assumed that because I was hiding behind a fake husband, I was weak. The truth is, I used that husband to keep the world at bay because I didn't want anyone intruding on my life. And now you've intruded. So here is how this works." I leaned forward, looking directly into his expressive, dark eyes. "We're going to be married. Legally." Julian blinked. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed his face. "Legally?" "Yes," I said. "If I am going to bear the burden of your obsession, I am going to have the full legal protection of your estate. We will sign a prenuptial agreement that guarantees me 30% of Vanguard holdings in the event of a divorce. We will have a public ceremony. Your investors, your board, the media, everyone will know me as your wife." Julian's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're taking a massive risk, Natalie. You're tying yourself to a man you don't know." "I know you," I said. "I know you're an obsessive, brilliant, deeply lonely man who uses technology to force people into your life because you don't know how to build real connections. But more importantly, you are tying yourself to me. Because once we are married, my silence is the only thing keeping your empire afloat. If you ever monitor me again, if you ever put a bug in my home, if you ever step foot near my grandfather without my permission, I will file for divorce, take my 30% of your company, and expose every single surveillance algorithm you've used illegally on your employees." Julian stared at me for a long time. The silence between us was heavy, charged with a strange, dark tension. Slowly, the surprise on his face melted away, replaced by a look of intense, quiet admiration. "You really are extraordinary," he whispered. He reached across the table, his hand open, waiting for me to take it. "You built a shield, Natalie, but you've turned it into a sword." I looked at his hand. I knew that by taking it, I was stepping into a dangerous, complicated world. I was entering a marriage born of blackmail, obsession, and power. It would be a life filled with secrets, a constant battle of wits with a brilliant billionaire. But as I reached out and placed my hand in his, feeling the warmth of his fingers closing around mine, I realized something. I was no longer the quiet, passive girl hiding in the corner of the office. I was no longer a late bloomer waiting for life to happen to me. I had stepped out of the shadow of my lie. And for the first time in my life, I was the one pulling the strings. "To our marriage, Julian," I said, raising my glass of champagne. He clinked his glass against mine, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous, dark promise. "To our marriage, my love."